For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Business mogul Vusi Thembekwayo discusses his book titled Business and Life Lessons from a Black Dragon. So you've been called many things. You are a dragon. I don't know which one you prefer. Self-made millionaire and even a leadership genius. But how would you describe Vusi Thembekwayo?
Oh, wow. I'd say just a guy trying to make a difference. That's it. I don't see myself as I think I'm blessed. I think God's been very kind to me. And I think I have extraordinary capabilities and talents. I'm just trying to use them to make a difference.
Can you also tell our viewers where you come from?
Yeah, so I come from a small township in the East Rand called Wattville, raised by a very traditional Swazi family, raised Zulu, so I identify more as a Zulu person than I do Swazi. Phenomenal parents, great loving mother, and an incredible father. My father he was literally a genius, and he was an amazing man. And so I have these amazing charismatic parents, and a strong loving family. And I come from a small community. My township is so small, you'll walk through it in 20 minutes, right? So that's it. So because it's so small, the idea of family became quite broad because, you know, the woman who grew up 4 streets away was my mom. And she caught me doing something naughty, you know. So you grow up with a deep sense of community, you grow up with a deep sense of service, and you grow up with a deep sense of self, which I suppose is kind of where I'm at in my life now, what I'm trying to do now and who I'm trying to work with and places I'm trying to give back. Is because I recognize that I come from that space.
And what motivated you to write this book?
So I was under pressure for the better part of a decade to write a book, owing, I suppose, to my work and to spaces where people thought, you have something to say, you should write it down. But I didn't write a book. I was actually quite nervous to write a book, and I put it off for 10 years. And the reason was, I was a little boy once, and I'll never forget, my father was reading a book. It was, I still remember the title. It was called The Richest Man in Babylon. So Dad's reading this book, and I see this book, and this is like a really cool book. So I said to my father, I said, you should write a book. And he looks at me and he goes, no ways. I said, why wouldn't you write a book? And he said something and it stuck with me. He said, there are 2 things a man will do that will outlive him. The one is the children he will bear. The other is the words he will write. So you've got to be very careful when you write it.
It was a bit poetic from the beginning when you were telling us, laying to us about Usain Bolt.
Yes.
Yeah, and you said we are all capable of striving, but you say it starts with us asking like tough questions.
Yes.
What questions were you telling us about?
So I'm fascinated by Jamaica. In fact, I think I'm fascinated by the Caribbean islands generally. I'm fascinated by the idea. Think about it this way, right? So over the past 15 years of what has been global athletics, the Caribbean islands, the Jamaicans specifically, have outcompeted the United States. But Jamaica is a country of what must be 2 million people, if not 3. It's very poor. The US is a country of 300 million people, and it's the wealthiest nation on earth. So I asked the question, how is it possible that this tiny little island, without the resources, can give us the fastest man in the world, and has done for the better part of 2 decades, and outcompete this one, which has all the training, all the technology, all the scientists, all the facilities, all the money, the national sport, the culture, it's all there, you know? How does that happen? The reason I started the book with the idea of Jamaica is because I fell in love with the idea that Usain Bolt is running. I wondered, when he's in a race and he runs, does he think about running away from the starting point? And at which point does he start thinking about running toward the end goal? There must be a transition there. Somewhere in that 100 meters, his mind must switch from run away from this to run toward that. And I think it's a story most of us identify with. When you come from where I come from, you spend much of your life running away. You're running away from the place you come from of poverty. You're running away from often communities that are underprivileged and disadvantaged. You're running away from crime. You're running away from substance abuse. You're always running away. But there comes a point where what you're running to must inspire you more than what you're running from. The thing about the running from is it's fear-driven. So at the back of your mind always you're fearful of the place you've been at. It's far more powerful when you look and go, but that's where I could go. Because then you're inspired. Then you bring a different energy to things. You're not as, you don't have this persistent feeling of a shortened future. You know, when you're running away from stuff, there's a persistent feeling of a shortened future, like it's just here. The minute I'm running towards something, I see it differently. I begin to create, to imagine. I begin to think, to inspire, to aspire. All of that stuff, like it's really, really cool. So that was why the reference to Jamaica, and that's what I was thinking when I wrote that chapter.
You've already told us a bit about your dad. I know you also speak highly of your mom in the book. What values did she instill to you growing up? Except for you cleaning the stoop.
I was about to say. So like my mom had a whole thing about never taking lightly the small things. My mom was and still is very detail oriented. So, you know, I reference the stoop in the book because I think it's a beautiful metaphor for just life, just the idea that you are gifted a patch and you could be as clean or as untidy with it as you will. And that ultimately how you treat it is not a reflection of it. It's a reflection of you, right? So, you know, my mom would come home and we used to do chores in the house. So my mom would come home and she'd then check the stoop. And if the stoop wasn't cleaned properly, there was a problem. I see my kids now go visit my mom and they get away with murder. I'm like, where's the mother I grew up with? You know, she's the grandmother now. Now she spoils them. But so yeah, it was that idea of take care of the small things. And that idea for me has become almost a pillar of how I live my life. Just the small things God gifts you, the small opportunity to occupy a room, the simple relationships, the opportunity to build those relationships. We're chasing after really big things. But if you were to sum those things down, they're nothing more than a series of small things stitched together. So if you take care of the small thing, the big thing kind of takes care of itself.
A lot of people, they have their fair share of meeting Madiba. They'll tell us stories of what happened. But yours was a bit different because we know you as like a public speaker. But that day you were speechless. Can you tell us about that day and what question did you ask the old man?
So, I mean, look, I was 17 at the time, and when you come into the knowledge that you're going to be meeting somebody like Madiba, you know, you can't not be shaken. So it was during school holidays, and the day I was supposed to go meet him, and I'd just come back from competing at the World Championships in public speaking, and he'd heard about it, so he invited me over to his beautiful foundation home at Houghton. So I go over there to see him, and I caught taxis to get there because Beganamo Dekaya, right? So, You know, everybody who lives in a township knows that amateksi drive on the main roads. So you have to come out of your house and walk up to the main road. So I walked up to the main road, I got there, I caught a taxi, and 4 taxis later, I eventually arrived at the Nelson Mandela Foundation office. And I'm sitting at reception, and Zelda comes to fetch me, and she takes me to the study, and I'm sitting waiting for him. And the beauty about the 4 taxi rides was I had a lot of time to think. So I thought to myself, on the journey there, I thought the only way I can really have this meeting is if I say nothing. Because I'm a kid, I'm 70, what am I going to say? Like really, what am I going to say to arguably the world's most iconic statesman of the 20th century? I'm going to say nothing. Rather, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and ask him really good questions. So throughout the taxi rides, in my mind, I'm scripting the questions. And I had one specific question. I thought to myself, this is my knockout question. So anyway, I get there. As I said earlier, I get taken to the study. I'm sitting waiting for him. And I heard him coming at a very loud walk. So I heard him coming. He knocks on the door. He comes in. We sit. We start talking. Again, I say nothing. I just ask questions. He used to love telling stories. He loved it. And I think I caught him on a good day because he was just firing these stories off. Like he was just waxing lyrical. And I'd ask him a 3-4 word question and he would wax lyrical for 20 minutes. So at the end of the hour, eventually we get to the end of the meeting. Zelda knocks on the door. She peeks her head to let him know her next appointment is there. And he looks at me and he says, you know, they said you're a public speaker. So I said, yeah, but that. He says, but man, you have not spoken. Right? I mean, he used to have the most amazing sense of humor. So he says to me, do you have any final questions? So I asked him the knockout question. My knockout question was, what is your hope for the future of South Africa? And he took a moment to think. So he says to me, South Africans need a little bit of hope. And he says, but more, they need a bit of faith. I said, what is this faith thing? He said, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. He said, faith is the ability to see the invisible, believe in the impossible, and trust in the unknown. I'm 17.
Didn't make sense.
What do you do with these words, right? So the meeting ends and you park the words at the back of your mind somewhere. It was only many years later, when you start going through life as an adult, that those words ring true and you remember what faith means. Yeah.
Wow. As a successful businessman, so we would like to know from you, what is needed to resuscitate our economy?
Wow. That is a loaded question. And I'm trying to think about the angle. Do I go macroeconomics? Do I go micro enterprise? Do I go fiscal policy, monetary policy? Where do I go? If you'll allow me, I'll try and touch on each of those. I think South Africa has a series of what are structural problems. And the problem with South Africans is what we love to do is to mask over structural issues by glazing short-termism and short-term deterministic policy almost. So for instance, we live in a country that is structurally and economically oligopolistic. So what that means is that there are a few firms that control major industries. The Americans will tell you, because what the US does very well is they build monopolies and then collapse them. That's what America is. So for instance, Rockefeller created Standard Oil, and then the Americans broke up Standard Oil and created many smaller oil firms, but the diversification of the oil industry built up much larger oil rig companies, freed up capital for R&D, and fueled the growth of the economy, right? So there is empirical evidence to suggest that concentrating power, economic power, is not good for long-term economic growth. What we're bad at in this country is the deconstruction of monopolistic and oligopolistic economic power. So for instance, we live in a country with 55 million citizens. 70 6% of them, I think, is the number, are Black African. Of the 4 major banks, none are Black African owned. Of the 5 major clothing retailers, none are Black African owned. Of the 6 listed food retail companies, none are Black African owned. Right. Consider then that what that means is none of those companies have the benefit of diversified, diverse, and imaginative thinking about the problems they're solving, which is why it doesn't matter which bank you go to. They sell you the same credit card, the same savings product, the same insurance product. It's because it's groupthink. They all think exactly the same way. The only way to grow an economy long term is to introduce innovation. The only way to innovate is to be diverse. So Kenya has 44 million people. It has 40 banks. And the Kenyan middle class is much smaller than ours. So people wonder, for instance, why the development of fintech in Kenya is far more advanced than the development of fintech here. It's because there's more people working in that space. And they come from different parts. They are Maasai or Kikuyu, or they see the world differently. And they approach the world with a different set of lenses. I think it was Chairman Mao that said, "Let 1,000 flowers bloom." The idea is that the more diverse the opportunities and options, the better the blossom of the forest. That's South Africa's problem. So how do you build South Africa? Well, break down the monopolies and oligopolies. Very hard to do because they control economic power. Very close relationship, by the way, with our politicians. That relationship is acidic, it's parasitic, it's toxic, and it's short-term. This is why, this is a deeply political point, this is why we have not done black economic empowerment in South Africa. We haven't. What have we done? What we've done is we've taken a few very well-known, well-connected people who hold the right card to the right organization. We brought them into the same boardroom. We moved out Piet. We brought in Mandela. And then we said, we have diversified. We have black empowered. Yet, just 20 minutes from where we are here in the heart of Sandton is Diepsloot. 10 from where we are, 10 minutes from where I'm sitting is Alex. So 20 plus years into this project we call Project South Africa, we look back and there are many firms that posted fantastic numbers about BE share schemes. Where are these share schemes? Where are these black people that benefited? Where do they live? Because you will find black people locked in a credit-fueled, consumption-led middle class. They have to work and have to earn a salary, because if they don't for 3 months on end, they will lose everything. That's where you'll find them. You might find one or two who've come into incredible wealth. They're the politically connected elite. You will find the majority at the bottom end of the pile. So how do you unlock the economy? Diversify, build smaller firms, introduce innovation, open up opportunity, and what you will find is 1,000 flowers will bloom.
My son has been saying that he doesn't believe in working for someone, so he has that thinking of having his own business.
Sure.
So speak to someone like him who has that kind of vision. Yeah,
I would say, first thing I say to everybody who wants to start their own business is get a job. It sounds the most counterintuitive advice. I'll tell you why. I learned the most about how to run a business when I was employed. Because when you're employed, you work for someone, you use their money to make mistakes, you learn everything about how a well-functioning company works. So you learn about IT, HR, management information systems, corporate finance, management accounting, sales, marketing, operations, admin, all of it. Working. Month end, you're being paid and you're learning. You start your own business, never having worked. What happens is you have to learn all of these things off your own back in a very tough world. So I think I've done well because when I was in corporate, I learned. I benefited from Black economic empowerment. I was an employment equity person who was moved around to different departments, got to see how things work. And then when I was in management, I was in general management, so I got a broad sense of the organization, and I could think broadly. I could also be very specific when I needed to, and deeply technocratic, but also broad and strategic where you needed to, right? And so today, as one builds businesses, I know how to do it because I did it working for someone. So best piece of advice I can give, especially to a young person who has never worked before, is get a job.
Why do you say money is a fleeting gift?
Because it is. It's by its very nature. If you use it, then you accrue to yourself and it the benefits or losses of it. But it is a fleeting gift. I think a lot of us use money as a determinant of our worth. It's not. Yeah. It's just a fleeting gift. You have it for the moment. And money, by its very nature, I like to think of money as a water. It just runs, right? And water that doesn't run will spoil. Algae will grow. Yeah. Money's the same. It's got to move, and I'm not saying you've got to be. You must still be judicious with your money, so don't waste it. But money not invested is money wasted. And that investment could be whatever. It could be a holiday when you need it. It could be getting another qualification. It could genuinely be investing it in something or starting a business. But it is a fleeting gift because it buys you into the spaces that you require, rather than it being the end goal.
How do you deal with challenges?
It depends. Sometimes I pray. Sometimes I meditate. Other times I scream. I live at the gym. It's the purest form of therapy. 20 kilograms has never cheated on me. It was 20 kilograms yesterday, it'll be 20 kilograms tomorrow. And my relationship with it is as it is. It's pure, it's simple. So one of the things I have learned to do, and I'm not yet perfect at it, but I'm learning, is I'm learning to see time in context. Because what happens with us is when you are in the moment is so intense that your whole entire life can be consumed in it. But time is a continuum, right? So you learn to see moment as a part of the continuum, not as everything. So when I go through challenges, I just remember it's part of the continuum. It started, so it must end, and then something must carry on. There must be life after this, as there was before it. Not easy, I have to tell you. Not easy. It's very difficult. I have been close to losing it all more times than you can imagine. Yeah.
But then there are people who are saying maybe they are looking up to you.
You know, I think one of the challenges of the world today is we make success look so effortless that we are complicit in the lie. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. I haven't seen my own kids in a week. And this is in December because of the hours I'm having to work and my travel. There was a time in my life I was very unhealthy, very overweight because of the hours I was putting in. I've lost friendships that I've had my entire life because of business and money. I've almost lost my mind. I've literally almost lost everything I've worked for. So what I don't do, it's how my mother raised me, is you don't wear your scars for the world to see. So whilst I won't get into the detail, let me tell any person watching this, don't sit at the altar of judgment and think this is easy, because it ain't. I think the difference, though, is it not being easy. I choose to do it anyway. And that's the difference. There are some people who, when it gets hard, will stop. I don't.
I spoke to someone and I told him that I was meeting you. And he said, I must ask you, do you think that your skills are underutilized in our country as compared to countries like you've mentioned, Kenya?
It's hard to answer that question and not sound a bit self-indulgent. Yes. The short answer is yes. I think the skills of a lot of us are underutilized in this country because we still live in a country where for your competence to be unlocked, for your brain power to be unleashed, you must sing the right tune. The thing about people who do stuff is we're generally not in the choir. So I'm not going to be singing everybody else's tune. And we have not yet, unfortunately, with our elected officials, we do not yet have a caliber of elected official so self-assured that they don't feel the need to be threatened when somebody presents an alternative view and does so intelligently. We come from an era, Wesane, that if you're a black person that spoke sense, they called you a clever black, as if being black and clever are mutually exclusive terms, like there's something strange about it. Yeah. So that being the baseline, you better believe a young person like myself is not necessarily somebody to whom people run to say, let's unlock this. I think just as a final note, our leaders are also not always capable of admitting when they don't know and just saying, I don't know. It's one of the most important skills I've learned personally about leading people is the ability to go, I actually don't know. How would you do it? That's why I've got you here. That's why I'm paying you. So that
fresh ideas.
Yeah, I actually don't know. Now, you were in jail fighting for liberation for 20 years. You came out and spent a decade, say, in a political movement. And now you are a minister of a deeply technocratic function. What do you know about it? Say, I don't know. But ongisize uyibona kanjani wena? And there is nothing wrong with that. But yeah, we're not there yet.
That was Vusi Thembekwayo speaking to Crema Media's Polity about his book titled Business and Life Lessons from a Black Dragon.